Hello viewers, and today we're going to be looking at another programming languages quick intro. Today we're looking at PHP, which is both an object-oriented and procedural programming language for server-side scripting, so programming on the web. Now, for this we're going to be using a different IDE to Visual Studio because we're finally out of the .NET framework, and so we're going to want another IDE application. You can use any IDE of your choice. The IDE I'm choosing to use today is CodeWriter. It's available for free on the Windows Store. To get CodeWriter, go into your Windows Store, type in CodeWriter, and it's the top app. I recommend it. It's great fun, it's easy to use, and it's very minimalist in its design. Without any further ado, let's crack on. We're going to want to create a PHP app. It's as simple as that. It already builds out the basic layout of the application itself. Now, this is great for client-side apps in that it's built out the HTML, but this, the first piece of the application that we're going to write will run entirely on server-side and won't be using any HTML. So I'm going to delete this. We're going to start off by opening up PHP. Now, PHP is an inline language, which means it fits into the HTML itself, so it needs its own opening and closing tags. And these are the question mark tags. It's as simple as that. Anything outside of there is HTML, anything inside of there is PHP. You can have any number of these slotted in line or in blocks before and after your HTML. So we're going to start off with an application that connects to a database. This database is going to contain some data. I already have the database set up on a web server that I'm using. I'll put a link on GitHub to some information about the database to make it easier for you to create your own. I'll be using a MySQL database running on a Linux system. The Linux system I'm using is based on Ubuntu 16.10 and it will be running PHP 7. This application is also back compatible to PHP 5. So, first of all, we're going to want to create an object for connection. So I'm going to declare that as a variable. In PHP you declare variables rather than explicitly with a variable command var or a variable type. PHP is very loosely typed. All variables just start with a $. And this is now my connection variable. It's as simple as that. And it's going to be of the type, well, no, it's going to contain the data for what's called a MySQL I connection. This is a way of connecting to a database. There are multiple ways in PHP. MySQL I is very robust and secure, and that's why I'm going to be using it today. It's also compatible with PHP 5 and 7. This is how you call the MySQL I connect method. Line endings in PHP, because it's a C-like language, are with a semicolon. Now, this method takes 4 arguments. The first argument is the host. This will be the IP address of your server, your database server. The second argument is the database username for the user of the database. The third is their password. This is also very important so that they can gain access. And the final is the name of the database you're going to be using. To connect to multiple databases using MySQL I, you'll have to use multiple connections. So the first argument, the host, I'm going to be running this on the database server itself, so it's localhost 127.0.0.1 would also be acceptable if your database is on the same server as your application. Second is the user. I've already created a database user called test. This is case sensitive. I should point that out. Next is their password. It's an Ubuntu system. To make things easier for myself, their password is Ubuntu. And the final argument it takes is the database name, and that's called testdb. It will be different for your database system, of course. Now I've created the connection, we're going to test it. So what this means is it's said that this variable, build it into memory already, here's its values, so it's declared and assigned all in one. Put it all together, and if the server's said, well, I don't have the library for MySQL I Connect, it's just going to kill it. So we're going to handle this error. We're going to say if exclamation mark dollar, the variable again, connection. So if connection is false, if it can't do connection, then it's going to die. This might seem a weird way of doing it. This is how PHP handles connections. So this is its way of killing the connection, or killing the attempt to connect, is with the die command. And we give it a message. That will be could not connect. The other reason it could fail rather than not having MySQL I is if the database wasn't there, if your user was incorrect, if your password was incorrect, or if you've got the wrong host. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong with the database connection. You just need to build it as robustly as you can and hope for the best. After could not connect, it's going to drop in the error code itself to tell you what's gone wrong, because that's really useful. That's imperative. You must have that. If you don't, then you're going to struggle with debugging. So that's to find the error code. It's from the MySQL I library again. So I underscore connect, another underscore, error. This is a method that doesn't take arguments, and it's as simple as that. To stop the text running into each other, I'll just put a little spacing in there, make it easier. And now we have our connection. Our connection is open, our connection is running. Now, if you thought this was simple, just wait till you get into some of the stuff we're going to do later on. For now, we're going to complicate things a little bit more. So, we're going to create a query to send a query to our database, some SQL. Again, robust naming conventions always help in debugging, always help the programmer. So we've declared it. Now we're going to assign it, and this is an inline declaration. We're declaring it in the code rather than as a block. You can do that in PHP without any problems whatsoever. And it's a MySQL I again. This time it's a query. What could be simpler? So, where's this query going to go? Well, it's going to go to the test database using this username and password on this host. So it's going to use connection. That's its first argument. Second argument it's going to use is the actual query itself. Now, this database contains a list of IDs, names and ages, and the application we're going to use is going to rank employees by age. So an employee puts their age in for a company, and it tells them what employees are older than them. Honestly, I couldn't come up with a decent brief for this, so I just thought I'd come up with something easy. So we're going to do some SQL here. If you don't know SQL, or SQL as it's commonly known, I'd suggest looking up a lesson on that. If you're interested in a tutorial from me, pop it down in the comments and I'll get back to you on that. I'm more than happy to do one. So we're going to say select, take all the data. The star means everything. Select everything you can from. So select everything I can from where? From the table. I have a table in the database. It's incidentally called table test. Wow. I wonder how I came up with that naming convention. I'm going to do it only in the case where age is greater than, and I'm going to pass it a variable, and this is a variable that's going to be called in the script that calls this script. Now, that sounds a bit complicated at the moment. You'll understand a bit more later as we go into this. Essentially, one PHP script can call another. It can include another. And it's going to pass it a variable. We're going to take that variable here. We're going to do some string concatenation here like we did with C#. PHP uses the dot. And the variable name is counter. You'll understand why as we get further into things. And then we want to put them out in some order. So we don't want them to be random. We want them to be in an order. We're going to order it by the ID. This is the unique identifier that each record holds. If you're into databasing, this is the primary key for the table. You're going to say order by ID. An ID is the name of a column, as is age. Okay, we're going to close off that line with our semicolon. It's as simple as that. We now have a query that's going to run in the connection that we're running to the database. Okay, now I've done that, I want to send some data out to the user. The way we send data out to the user in PHP is with the use of the echo command. It's like taking one lump of data and echoing, pushing it out. So we say echo, then we want to give it a value. Now this value here can contain plain text, or it can contain pre-formatted HTML. This is really useful. If you're building something such as a CMS, you can actually write an entire website in a database. You can write your pages in databases, posts in databases, and just echo them out to the user as the user needs them. This makes it really fast, really memory efficient, and really space efficient for the server as well. So we're going to do a paragraph, HTML paragraph using the p tag. Can't spell. The following people are older than you. Now we're going to end our p tag. This is the end of that paragraph, and I'm going to start a list. This is going to be an unordered list. HTML unordered lists are the UL tag. And now I'm going to do a little bit of a loop. So I'm going to iterate through all the rows in the database where it's possible that age might be greater than our counter variable. Okay, so this is a while loop. So we're doing this while. I'm going to create another variable here called row to handle the rows, and that's going to be another MySQL I type. It's going to be MySQL I underscore fetch. So this is pulling back from the database now rather than pushing out to it. So we've got MySQL I connection and query push out, MySQL I connect query push out, fetch pulls back in. We're going to pull it back in as if it were a PHP array. This is a really cool feature that's built into the language already, makes things so much easier for us. And so how are we going to do this? What are we going to send to pull back this array? Essentially we've got to send something, the server sends something back, and we pull that. So we're going to send out our query that we defined earlier, and in return we want a certain part of the data it sends back. Now it sends back a lot of data, and PHP formats that in a lot of ways. What we want is called a MySQL I ASSOC, which is the associated data for the records. It's a long story. This is all in caps now. It's MySQL I underscore ASSOC, stands for associated data for the records. Okay. Opening and closing loops with braces like in other C-based languages. And now we're going to create some more variables to handle this array. Now it's important we understand that row is now an array, and you must handle it as an array rather than any other variable type. So we've got a name we know is in the database, and an age we know is in the database. One thing we don't know, one thing we do know but we won't be using, is the ID. I've just realised I missed a semicolon there. Always check all your semicolons, they're very important. We're going to give name a value, and it's going to be the name from our database. So it's going to be the name from that row, and the value that we want the record we want the associated value of is called name. It's called name in all caps in my database. It's case sensitive again, it's just got to be the same as your database. It doesn't necessarily have to be all caps. And then we're going to do the same with age. Like so. Okay. Next up, we're going to do some echoing out again. We're going to push out this list that we started to make a few minutes ago. So we're going to echo again. Echo. We want a list item in HTML, like so. And again, we want to concatenate in some values. So we're going to use the name variable that we just created. Split it up a bit with a comma and a space. That's just English. And we're going to want to use our age. Okay. And again, we want to now close the list item like so. Excellent. So we've now got a list that opens, fills up with the ages of people who are older than the counter variable, and then it doesn't do anything, it stops there. So we want to now close off the list. We want to do that outside of the loop. This is because we don't want to close off the list and then try and add another list item as it finds a new record. So once it's finished looping through, we're then going to close off the list with another echo, and it's going to be /ul, closing off the list in HTML. Now we're going to close our MySQL I connection that we started all the way up here on line number 2 with a MySQL I _ close. MySQL I contains so many really useful features. It's brilliant to use, and it's probably, I think, the best connection method we have within PHP itself. MySQL I _ close. And what are we going to close? Well, it's $connection. Excellent. So now we have a little PHP program which must be passed a variable from somewhere else, the counter variable we mentioned here. It creates an entire database connection, sends data to the database, pulls data back from the database, and formats it and puts it out to the screen for the user. This is excellent. So now we're going to save this. Hit save at the bottom here, save as. Where's tutorials? Okay, I'm going to create a new file for this episode. I think we're on episode 4 now, and I'm going to call this database connection.php. That'll do me. Okay, now one thing you want to be aware of, when you're on a web server, most of your script and all of your HTML will run from under your web root folder. This is the folder on your hard drive from which the internet can access your computer. However, in PHP we need certain protections, because someone could spoof our website and download this script, and this contains the host name, the username, the password, and the database name. This is very dangerous. Someone could do anything to your database. They could inject malicious scripts into your site, fill your site with viruses, and all of your users' sites with viruses. So what we want to do is we're going to put this one level above the web root in a higher up folder. This means it can't be accessed from the web, but it can be accessed from your server. Okay, we're going to create a new file now. This is going to be the other half of our PHP program. Again, PHP, and this time we are going to be using some HTML. And we're back. So we have our basic HTML set up now. We're using a little form here that the user will input their age into. Action equals nothing. This means it's just going to recur. It's not going to send off to an external script. The script is internal. It's in the page itself. Method equals post, which means that it's going to post the data rather than using a get method. They're both valid methods of data transfer through servers. Doesn't matter for the time being. It doesn't matter for our purpose either. Input type equals text box, name equals age. This is our age text box. Input type equals submit, value equals submit. This is our submit button. Okay, now we've run through that, we're going to get into it. So we're going to check that the user has posted, has used this form. So we're going to say if, and we're going to use a server level variable. So this isn't a variable we create in our script, it's a variable that's already there, made by the PHP on the server itself. It's called $_post. And this checks whether the user's posted. Okay, so now I've got that, I'm going to declare a variable. This is the counter variable we talked about earlier in the lesson. And this is $counter, and it's equal to 0 for the time being. Alright, next we're going to give it a value. So we've declared it, and now we're going to give it a value. So this is how you traditionally do variables. $counter now equals $_post, using this post variable from the server again. Now we're using it as an array. Okay? And now we're going to use its contents, and part of its contents is going to be the data we've submitted, and one of the bits of data up here is called age. So we're going to use $_post age. Isn't it simple? Oh, it would be if I could type on camera. Okay, and so now we have our counter variable is equal to the age that the user's put into the age text box. Okay, now we're going to test that they're a normal age for you to be using the internet. We don't want to be sending information to kids, we don't want to be sending information to people who can hardly understand the internet. This is mainly to teach you about conditional operators. So we're going to say if we use our variable again, $counter is, let's say, less than 5. We don't want people who are less than 5 on our website. It can do something. We're going to use the conditional OR, much like we did in C#. Double vertical line. Again, shift and the key next to it. I'm going to say $counter is greater than 90. So they're less than 5 or greater than 90. We don't want to do anything with them. And there is actually a way to completely quit all running PHP on a website. It's very useful, especially if you're using it in things like hacking protection. So if there's a situation where you know someone might be hacking your website, you input this command. Now it's used much like it is in C, in which it exits a functional procedure. Except in PHP, if you're not using a function, I'm not at the moment, this is going straight into the main running of the site. It kills all the PHP from that point onwards. Even if you close off your PHP tags and open it up again, it's gone. Okay? After this, we're going to start up another variable. I want to call this other variable inverse counter. And it's equal to 0. This is because we're going to go through some iteration, and I want to use another variable in that. So now we're going to use a for loop. For loops are used in programming for iterating through numbers of data and variables where there is a finite number, where you know the amount. Okay? And this is what's called a C-like for loop declaration. The for loop takes 3 parameters, but they're not classed as parameters in the normal sense. They're written like they are lines. They're separated by semicolons. So we're going to use the counter variable, and we're going to check that the counter is greater than -1. So from whatever its original value all the way down to 0 is what we're going to iterate through. Okay, and now we're going to set what steps we iterate it in. So we could go through maybe 2 at a time, 3 at a time, 10 at a time, or we could just go through 1 at a time. There's a shortcode way of doing that. We could say counter -1, or shortcode counter double minus. Take 1 off the value of counter every time you iterate through the loop. Okay, so now we're going to do some content within that for statement. So within that for loop, we're going to create an if statement again, and we're going to say if inverse counter if inverse counter equals 0, conditional equals is double equals in PHP, a signatory equals is single equals. As you can see, assigning equals there is 1, checking it there is 2. If inverse counter is 0, we want to print something out to the screen. So this is the first time it iterates through, it's always going to print this out to the screen because we've started at inverse counter equals 0. And I'm going to say your age is whatever it is. So I want to echo, and this time rather than using a HTML paragraph, I'm going to use a pre-tag, which is pre-formatted text that is formatted in the programming language you're using itself. Pre. Now I'm going to say your age is I want to add something onto that. I'm going to use the counter variable because counter holds the value of the age that they put into the text box. So your age is this. And now I want to close off that section of pre-formatted text like so. Okay, it's very useful. Now if the inverse counter isn't 0, I want to use the inverse counter as a mathematical operator. Okay, so I'm going to say when inverse counter is 0, your age is whatever your age is, say 10. When it's 1, your age is 9. When it's 2, your age is 8, etc., etc. So that counter is always inverse to inverse counter, and the two can oscillate between each other. It's going to be good fun. Okay. So we're going to say your age minus the value of inverse counter is counter. Okay, and then we'll do some maths for it later on. So your age minus inverse counter is counter. Let's see how you can do that. So hopefully you should now have something like this. It might be something different. There's a million ways to do it. This is the way I've come up with. We're going to echo it out again. It's another bit of pre-formatted text. Your age minus the value of inverse counter is the value of counter. Close off that pre-formatted text. Now once I've done everything within the loop, I want to do some maths. So I'm going to say inverse counter equals inverse counter plus 1. So as the loop's running through, counter is getting 1 less every time, inverse counter is getting 1 more every time, and eventually they're going to have switched places completely. Okay? This is all very good and fun. Now we're going to move on to using our database. Okay? So this is where the fun begins. Okay, so we're going to leave our PHP for now and head back into our HTML. We're going to create a div. This is how HTML is usually split up into little usable blocks. We're going to give it an ID of database. Okay. And within database, we're now going to run some more PHP. So, as you can see, we never truly closed out. Oh no, we shouldn't have done that, should we? No. Leave that line there, sorry. As you can see, we never truly closed out of our post check earlier in PHP. So when we call more PHP, it's still running that same script. Okay? So this is still a continuation of what we had earlier in the page. So to now close out of that, we do this. So now we have this matching up with this, matching up with this, matching there, matching there, matching there. Essentially we're going out then in again, and all the braces match. If we didn't have this, the if statement for the post loop would never finish. It would always be checking whether that's the case. As it is, we've reached an endpoint. However, before we reach an endpoint, we want to do something with it. Okay, so I'm going to reset the value of counter back to its original underscore post age. So this is back to the age that the user put in. And then I'm going to do some including. So now I'm going to pull in that file we created a few minutes ago. Now because on the server that will be in the directory above, we're not going to call it directly, we're going to call the directory above /that. Okay? So, we've got, so we're going to use our PHP include command. This includes the file that we need to use. Okay? Include, and we're going to pass it a parameter of the file name. The parameter we're going to pass it is .. which is used in Unix-based systems. It just means the file above this one, and it's going to be we call it databasecon.php. So now it's going to get to this line here, running all the way along, and it's then going to carry on running the PHP inside our include. Essentially, it's making one big script out of all the little scripts we've put together. Okay? Now, I think that's fairly simple, he says, jokingly. No, it's quite high-level stuff, but it just shows some of the uses of PHP, and PHP is a very versatile language. Okay? So, we're going to save this. Commands, save as. And I'm just going to call it, say, php test.php. Now I'm going to move these files onto my server, and I'm going to be running one. I'm going to be running this one in the web root itself. So it'll be whatever the server's name is /php test.php, and our database con file will be one archive above. One directory above. Okay. Now I'll get back to you when I'm on the server. I'll see you there. Back, I'm on my web server, and as you can see, we have the two files we made earlier. I've moved them across. We have here in our web root itself the PHP test file we made, and one level above it we have our database connection. So let's see these actually running. We have the PHP here. Okay, so just for the sake of clarity, while we're here and we have the server running, I'm running PHP version 7.0.15, although this is compatible with PHP 5 as well as PHP 7, using Apache 2. Here's all my details. Obviously quite boring stuff in the interest of transparency. It's an Ubuntu based system. Some things are tweaked ever so slightly, but it's all fairly fitting. So we're going to go to our PHP test file that we created earlier, and we now have this. So this is the box where we want to input our age. So let's say we're 5. We'll submit it, and now the server's going to run the PHP. As you can say, your age is 5, your age minus 1 is 4, minus 2 is 3, minus 3 is 2, etc. The following people are older than you. Here's a list of the staff in our database. Okay. For the sake of transparency, let's view the database. Okay, so we said the database was called testdb. Let's so we can now see this is the data that we're working with. This is a printout of the table in the database. There's 3 members of staff, James, Bob and Ahmed. They're 19, 29 and 39 respectively, and as you can see they're ordered by ID. Okay, so let's see, I was 28. This would make me older than James but not than Bob and Ahmed. So hopefully it should show the following members of staff are older than me. There you go. So it does work. It's a working script. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm afraid I couldn't do what I intended to. The hope was that our final session, the end of the week, would be Classic ASP. However, I couldn't get my hands on a Classic ASP server in time, so instead we're going to be doing C. C is a traditional monolithic language, beautiful and elegant in every way, used for the majority of open source coding as far as I'm aware, and it's brilliant fun to learn. If you know C, you can learn just about any other language. Most modern languages are based on C. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.